My name is Clarissa. I'm 37 years old, and this is my story. I was born in a small little desert town, 20 minutes from the Mexicali border. And at the age of 2, my parents moved us to the Bay Area where they pastored a church. My parents were pastors for about 25 years of my life. All I knew was church. I was a pastor's kid, and church was our life. We were there several days out of the week. Our house was always just filled with a lot of people, a lot of laughter. So that was the beauty of growing up. There was also its dark sides. There was some really tough things that we went through. There was a point where my dad had backslidden. And so your identity is kind of just, it gets confusing when you were raised a certain way. And then now the person who helped to raise you and taught you these morals and is no longer serving God the way you were taught to serve God. And then my parents went through a divorce during that time. So just a lot of questioning and a lot of confusion. Yeah, so the questioning that occurred was, God, how can someone dedicate this many years of their life and then walk away? Were you ever real to that person? Are you real? Can that ever happen to me? The questioning of religion and relationship, as well as like serving God from a place of like desire or serving God from a place of obligation. So I met my husband in 2009. It's a funny story because I was on a dating app and they had like a free trial, and dating apps were not in 2009 like what they are now. It was still kind of taboo back then. And so I went on a free trial, and on my last day of the trial and on his last day of the trial, we kind of matched. We just started talking on the phone, texting, and then we went on a date. And I remember I pulled up to his business at the time, and he was on a forklift. And he was all dressed up, ready for the date, but he was on a forklift moving motorcycles inside. And that was like my first impression was like, oh, like he's super masculine, like he's a guy's guy, motorcycles, and so I was like, this is interesting. And he was something different, like I had never met. He was the guy who like opened the car door, took me to an amazing restaurant in Seal Beach on our first date. I was just paying attention and thinking, this guy's different. And then a few months later, he asked me to be his girlfriend. And before he asked me to be his girlfriend, I would literally receive like elaborate floral arrangements to my office, or I'd be driving home on the freeway and he'd pull up next to me on the motorcycle just to wave hi, or I'd come out of work and there was a card on my windshield, or there would be surprises for me, deliveries at my house. Actually, New Year's Eve, it was January 2012. He asked me to marry him. We were at a restaurant at the top of a hill, and they brought out the dessert, and I took off the lid, and there was an amazing Vera Wang diamond ring, and he asked me to marry him. I had never seen that, not even with like friends. I'd never seen friends experience like love like that, not my family, and so it did feel a little different, but there was parts of me that felt worthy of that. Like, I'm worthy of this. I felt like, God, I've honored you. Like, I've honored you with my life, my body. So like, this is my reward. We were going to church together. We were serving in children's together. We had a beautiful wedding. And we also bought a home in Rancho Cucamonga that we were fixing up. We were happy. We traveled together. I was a social worker for foster youth, and he owned his own motorcycle and car shop. And we were happy. We were in love. We were building a life. Yeah, I went into the marriage, no guards up, in it for the end. I gave it my all. I truly just believed, like, if you're gonna build a life with someone for the rest of your life, you don't have to hold anything back. Okay. So you build a life with someone, all walls down. And that's how I just went throughout my marriage. About November of 2011, I went on a mission trip with my mom. We went to Europe, and I was gone for about 16 days. And within the 16 days, I noticed the communication between him and I was diminishing. And he was just saying like, oh no, it's the time difference, or I missed your call, or I couldn't get a hold of you. But women's intuition, like I immediately felt something is not right. And before I had actually went on the trip, I really felt God say like, your life will never be the same. I was standing in my front yard on the phone with a friend, and I said, I feel like God is saying my life will never be the same after this mission trip. Me thinking something transformational is gonna happen in Europe in the mission trip, and God's gonna like speak to me and tell me my purpose or something, you know? I remember asking, is everything okay? Are we good? And he said yes. And there was even little behaviors, like all of a sudden he's going to the gym, which is something he wouldn't do normally. And to some people, they wouldn't think anything about it, but I felt something different. Like I felt my husband is not the same. The night before we left, he did share with me, when you get back home, we need to talk. We're on the flight back. And the flight from Europe back to LA is like a 16-hour flight. I cried the entire time. I was sitting next to my mom, crying the entire time, and I looked at her and I said, Mom, do you think he's gonna ask me for a divorce? And she said, no way. Like, no way, Clarissa, like, no way. You guys are fine, everything is fine. So we land, and he picks us up from the airport. He's a little standoffish with me for a husband who hasn't seen his wife in 16 days. I couldn't sleep that night. He didn't want to talk. And he actually slept on the couch, which to a wife, that's really odd. The next day I was again begging, like, please tell me what's going on. Please tell me what's going on. He didn't want to share anything. And then finally that evening he said, I don't think I can do this anymore. And I said, do what? And he's like, marriage. Like, I don't think I can do this anymore. I don't think I can be married anymore. And I was like, what? Where is this coming from? Like, we're fine. Everything is great. He said, no, I really want to rethink my life. I want to close my business. I want to end this marriage, and I just need a new start. Of course, you can imagine it was shocking. It was overwhelming. I said, why don't we try therapy? Where's this coming from? Is there another woman? No. He's like, I might be having like a midlife crisis. I didn't believe it, and I just started asking God to please save my marriage. Please change his heart. Please restore this. And then there was no change happening. He wasn't having a change of heart. He was more adamant that this is what he wanted. So I finally asked God, and I prayed the hardest prayer. which is probably the hardest prayer for anyone to pray, is let your will be done. And then slowly things started to be revealed shortly after that prayer. Very shortly, I started finding out that there was other women. He denied it. He denied that there was other women until there was proof he couldn't deny. The most painful thing I have ever experienced in my life. Just from the betrayal, the distrust, the lies, the feelings that come up, that rise up in you when there's other women, of feeling like, was I not good enough? The feelings of, how can I ever trust anyone again? Like, was I sleeping next to a stranger the last 4 years? Have you been a stranger these last 8 years? Even the feelings of like, God, you knew this was gonna happen, and you let it happen. You take on an identity of a wife. You take on an assumption that I'm here till we die. And then in an instant, your life is turned upside down and you're questioning everything again. You're questioning who you are, who they are. How did this happen? Why did this happen? God, is this your will? God, do you want me to fight for this? Do you want me to let it go? Are you opening a door? Are you closing it? And I remember having a conversation with him and saying, I will give 99%. All I'm asking is you to give 1%. And he said, I can't do that. And that's when I knew there's nothing to fight for. My attorney at the time had said we needed to remain in the same home. I still stayed in the home for like 3 or 4 months with him. So he was on a trip for about 2 weeks. And I was like, this is my window to get out. And I was already planning to leave. He didn't know. So, and on one of those days, he was laying on the couch and I knew he was getting a flight that night where he was gonna be gone for the 2 weeks. And he's laying on the couch and he looked at me and I stared back at him and I said goodbye. And he said bye. And I walked out and I knew I was saying goodbye forever. He got on a plane, he left, and within those 2 weeks, I packed up the house, most of my stuff. I packed up my items and I found an apartment and I moved out. And I left a note on the table with my P.O. box that said, send all mail here. And he never seen me again. Okay. So after I moved out, I got an apartment by myself in Rancho Cucamonga. And in that time, I was alone. Like physically, I was living alone. And that's how it felt. I felt like alone. Sure, I have family, I have friends, but I felt alone and I felt like I needed that time to be alone with God. Such a closeness to God like I've never felt before. And the scripture that really just resonated with me in that time was that God is near to the brokenhearted. And I was definitely brokenhearted and I definitely felt God near. There was also a part of me that was also, again, questioning. Like, God, I honored you. I honored this man. I honored this marriage. I was a virgin when I married him. Like, I checked the boxes. We went to church together. We served together. I have done it right. The pastor's kid, the virgin. remember sitting and asking God, was it worth it? Was honoring you worth it? I said, okay, God, I did everything right and look where we're at. Maybe I need to go do it wrong then. Like this rebellion kind of came up in me. There's another woman living in my home. She didn't honor you. And now she has my home and she has my husband. So do I need to go do the same? Do I need to go get mine because you didn't give it to me? There was anger that came up. There was anger towards him, anger to the woman he cheated on me, anger to God. And I remember feeling like, Clarissa, you have two choices because God gives you free will. And do what we've been doing, right? Honor God, keep going to church, or we can see what's on the other side that you never really tapped into. I never was wild and I was never the girl, like that just wasn't who I was. I was a church girl. I internally battled with that, but I never went in that route. I was at church, in my word, in devotion, journaling, going to the gym, literally pouring everything into myself and my relationship with God. So what rebuilding looked like to me was the continual process of like, instead of looking at this as a loss, it's a gain. I now get to ask God, like, my life is kind of starting again, God. What are all the possibilities? What can we turn this life into? And as I began to just do that and sit in the presence of God, I just really felt God like downloading things into me. And God just began to reignite in me dreams that I believe had died. I didn't know God was putting the pieces together in that time of healing, building a story. I didn't know God was building a brand, a company, companies. I didn't know. All I knew was get up and take a step. Get up and take a step, like one step at a time. And the more I did that, mind you, I was still like going through the divorce. It wasn't even finalized, right? I was just trusting God, working on myself. And the pain that I once thought was never gonna go away slowly started to diminish. In June 2017, when I received the divorce papers, I went to my P.O. box and I got the divorce papers. And I remember feeling like a whole entire lifetime with someone is done with a signature. A signature. And I remember looking at that signature and saying like, wow, my dreams with this person started with the signature, a marriage license, and they ended with the signature. And then thinking like, but God's signature. Like his blood. That never goes away. That never goes away. And the knowing of that made the signature on that paper so much easier. And the scripture, like, he will never leave you or forsake you, like really hit home. The other scripture that I just carried with me throughout is in Psalms. Psalms 3, verse 3 it says, Jehovah art a shield about me, my glory and the lifter up of my head. And when you're dealing with something in life where the heaviness of it is so intense that you literally walk around with your head down, to know, like, you are a shield around me. I can lift my head up with confidence knowing that you are for me. that you protect me, that it doesn't matter what the situation looks like right now. You're for me. Like, you signed for my life with your blood. Like, you're never leaving me. It's you and I together forever. And that gave me the strength to literally overcome anything that was thrown my way. Like, Jesus can get me through anything. If he can get me through this, I can do anything. And so then when the thought of starting a company came up, God reminded me of what we had just gotten through together. So the thought of building a business didn't seem scary to me anymore. I was actually a wardrobe stylist on the side. So I was a full-time social worker, and I would do some styling on the side. My love for fashion and my life's work of giving back to foster kids is kind of how New Palm was birthed. So New Palm is a fashion brand that gives back to foster youth. For those who don't know, a palm tree can bend. Like in storms, if you ever see a storm, look at the palm trees. They bend, and they bend really low, but they don't break. And so God was kind of instilling that in me, like, girl, you didn't break. So, God, I'm crying so much. I did not think I was gonna cry this much. Yeah, so New Palm, I built it during the divorce, and then I launched it in 2017. And we've done amazing things with New Palm. We've given back to foster kids. We've done toy drives, pop-ups. And then in 2022, my business partner and I, Selena, launched Limitless Studios, which is a peer space and event space here in downtown Pomona, which we're currently at. To film in our studio feels like redemption to me. It feels like a promise being fulfilled that now people could see. Like, you've seen where I was at. You've seen my brokenness. You've seen a little bit of what I've gone through. You've seen where I didn't have a plan. And now we're standing in the middle of a miracle. This is like the fruit of what I was planting in my brokenness. We're now bearing the fruit of it. So I want this to be a testimony of, like, if you honor God with the uncertainty, if you honor God with the heartache and the brokenness, like, and so to be standing in it and now sharing with someone who's probably watching this and probably feeling like they're at the lowest part, and they're really standing there asking themselves, like, is this worth it, God? Are you worth it to me? Like, no one's hearing me. I feel like I'm alone. I hope my story is really an encouragement to that person, because I was there too, and I didn't see it. That God is always faithful to us, but I'm glad I was faithful to Him to be able to have this moment and to be able to experience this moment and the miracle of God's faithfulness. To be able to just see it is quite overwhelming. And I'm just grateful.